of the matchup is Alex Perez. Out of the matchup is Brandon Royval. And in on short notice, we have Nono. Alessandro Costa, somebody that UFC fans might know, they might recognize, might be one of my favorite fighters from Dana White's Contender Series. Not to say that his performance was all that great, but for Alessandro Costa, he did fight on Contender Series this past summer. Week 1, 4 fights, beat Joe Pyfer, so everybody forgets about all the other fighters that were on that episode. Now, Anton Turkalj got a win there, ended up in the UFC after the fact. You also had Denis Buzukja, who continues to campaign for a shot over on Twitter. He's not there yet, but for Costa, he fought with Lux. He was a champ over there. He wins that fight by split decision. And then he has to get another win over with Lux and end up in the UFC. But we talked extensively about Costa on our Dana White's Contender Series preview show, and I would be remiss if we missed that preview. So we're going to throw it on back to that, update you with Costa's last performance, and then talk about Amir Albazi. The last fight that's on this card, which is actually the first fight that's on this card, Alessandro Costa, the Lux flyweight champion, is going to be taking on a man who's undefeated. And I've talked about him and his brother before. You have Adrian Luna Martinetti. You also have Andreas, who's fighting this weekend. And when I look at that fight, that's kind of my marquee, can't miss matchup. It's at flyweight. There was a lot of chatter whether or not this fight would be at bantamweight, because if you look at it for Luna, he's got experience in both divisions. He's also 5'7". He's bigger than most guys at bantamweight and at flyweight. Made weight successfully coming in this week, which you obviously love to see. And if I can give you the particulars there, Martinetti in at 126. You have Costa in at 126 as well. Costa's 5'3". He's like a John Lineker, John Dodson type in this division. And I look at these two guys when they fight, and I don't know how much tape study you did, kind of getting ready for just that fight. That's where my pick's going to come in. But I think this fight's going to be a lot of fun, and I think the winner's probably going to end up with a contract.
I would agree with that, but here's the thing. Based off last season, every winner's probably going to get a contract on this show.
My overall breakdown of Martinetti, of Luna, goes out there, strikes very long, keeps his hands low, which can help him with the threat of the takedown. He does have wonky striking. He does take long periods of inactivity when he does strike, but his kicks are a major force in his game because he doesn't tend to box a lot from range. It's a lot of kicks. It's a lot of front kicks. It's a lot of things you have to look out for. And then when I compare him to a guy like Costa, Costa's actually been taking on a decent level of competition. He's a Brazilian training out of Mexico from that camp of Diego Lopez, who a lot of people were excited about on Contender Series as well, UFC adjacent, so on and so forth. But again, Lux is one of those promotions I look at it, who was it? Renato Valdez that fought Matt Frivola was a Lux guy. He's kind of fire with fire. But when I watch Costa, this guy, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, great takedowns, very small for the division, very compact, keeps his hands really high, ducks and moves with the punches. Sometimes when he brings his hands down, he forgets that he can move, and he leaves himself.
Is he the spiritual successor to your boy Douglas Silva de Andrade?
He kind of is, and that's what I like out of him. I know he's got, again, Kike Gonzalez that he took on his last time out. He wobbled him with a lot of shots. He was able to take him down. He was able to threaten with his grappling, with his submission ability. Jorge Calvo Martin, whose name was spelt a couple of different ways in some of the fights. That was another good one. I go all the way down through it. Again, 2018, he's losing in combate to Ivan Hernandez Flores. That was 9-2-1, which was a decent level of competition. So, again, for me, when it comes down to it, making a pick this week, I know size is in the court of Andreas Luna Martinetti. I know so on and so forth, but I do like Costa in that fight. All right, so for Costa in that episode, when he's taking on Luna Martinetti, he ends up getting the split decision win in the second round. He throws a short right hand, drops his opponent, and that's kind of the calling card for Costa in all of these fights. But if you go watch his fight that he had not that long ago, back in October, against Carlos Gomez, I mean, the former 2015 Gold Glove winner, Go-Go. Didn't you like him? He was flashing.
He was pretty good, actually.
He had a lot of fun, Carlos Gomez. But if you look at the fight against the Costa had over there with Lux, it's 12 seconds. He throws a right hand, and like Carlos Gomez would throw for the bleachers or swing for the bleachers, that was kind of his thing. Costa lands that right hand, and his opponent does almost like a 360 and lands on his face, and Costa looks so scared that he knocked him out that bad.
He did. What a gentleman. Gotta be honest, though. fighting Amir Albazi in your debut was a tough ass.
So Costa's good with jiu-jitsu, and we know the gym that he trains out of by now. For Albazi, trains out of Extreme Couture with the Basharat brothers. You know that he was a, 6-time Swedish Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion. For Albazi, he is that grappler in this division. And again, he was matched up with Alex Perez
yoked up.
and Brandon Royval. The only way I see Costa winning this fight is catching Albazi with a hand, and Amir Albazi strains very straight up with his hands quite low, and he is susceptible to getting hit.
And I don't think saying that is disrespecting Costa's chances in this fight. I think Amir Albazi would offer a tough fight to Mateusz Nicolau, honestly. Not saying he'd win. I'm just saying, going into that fight, I don't know what the odds would be. I don't know what the Tapology predictions would be. You get the idea. That would be a very competitive matchup, and I think very highly of Mateusz Nicolau. So for Costa, could he have one of those stock-raising losses? That could be on the table, but there's sometimes that the UFC sets people up in one of these no-win situations, and you hate to say this, and I really wish I could break this down more in depth, but Amir Albazi, like you said, is one of those grapplers who, if you're a guy in the top 5, top 10, you need to game plan strictly for this guy for 2 months, and you are still going to have a really hard time with it.
The only thing that scares me a little bit in it, you talk about the Basharat brothers, how good they are with their hands, but they're very well-rounded on the mat, and they continue to show that in their fights, and for Albazi, it's almost like the opposite. He's so good on the ground that he started to show a little bit more on the feet. And I think if he tries to expand upon that, I'm going to sound like Joe Rogan when Khabib fought Al Iaquinta. Don't do it. This isn't the fight to do it. I don't want to see it. And we did see it a little bit against Francisco Figueiredo. So for Albazi in the UFC, beats Malcolm Gordon by triangle, beats Jalga Shumagula, beats Francisco Figueiredo, favored to win all 3 of those fights and heavily in some of them. But again, it does scare me a little bit where he will kind of leave those hands at about chest height, walk around, throw a little bit of boxing. He's a little stiff, a little straight up. And against a guy like Costa, it's a little scary. And for Costa, the picture, now I took that off his Instagram and he's yoked up in most of it anyway. But he was listed in some of his fights before he came into the UFC at 5'3", so he's at a disadvantage height-wise. But he has really good takedowns. He has really good jiu-jitsu. He has really good boxing. In this fight, I don't know if he'll be able to accentuate those, but I think Costa's going to be one of those guys. He's going to be around for a really long time in this division. He's not going to flare out even if he wins or loses to Albazi. You're going to see Costa for a really long time. Seems like a bit of a disservice, but also, finally, you're in the UFC, and I thought he should have been in the UFC anyway off the Contender Series win.
That's great and all, but his first fight in the organization is really difficult. Again, I don't know why the UFC does this. They know how to promote some prospects, and I understand they're going to heavily promote some people more than others. But if you think of Paddy Pimblett, a guy who's been in the headlines a lot, he got a pretty slow burn his first few fights, right? They didn't give him Damir Ismagulov right out the way. They started giving him guys who are slowly better fight after fight after fight. For Costa, you would expect a similar kind of build-up. Not, hey, you want to fight Amir Albazi on a week's notice?
And if you go back to the Shorty Torres fight that Albazi had over with Brave, Shorty Torres can have experience there, but Shorty Torres would most likely be a top 15 UFC fighter if they decided not to get rid of him. Costa wants to take it to the ground. Well, that's like wearing a wetsuit against a shark. That's just a dumb idea. You're going to be a seal. It's going to be game over. So we look at the odds in this one. Albazi open minus 400, minus 450. Costa open plus 250, plus 340. High on Costa. I wouldn't anchor anything to this one. We have a look at the Topology votes. Matt, surprised us there to you. I'm going to say over under 90% Albazi.
I'll say over.
Man, they are just wild this week. 586 total votes, 94% Albazi, 67% by submission for the 6% that have Costa, 35% by decision, 35% by knockout. I think Albazi wins the fight. It might not have been the most fun fight, but hey, you got a pretty good look at Alessandro Costa and why I like him.
Hopefully it shows us something good, but the only issue is, if you play basketball against someone way better than you, like an NBA level player, you don't really learn anything because they're that much better than you. And I don't think Albazi is worlds away from Costa. But at a certain point, you have to match up people who are in their skill pool at least. And I really do think with Albazi, they're doing Costa a huge disservice. I like Amir Albazi quite a bit in the matchup. But again, it's a weird fight having a guy who is one of the top ranked fighters in his weight class fighting someone making their debut.
We'll see if Nono can throw like you had Hernandez do against Dariush. But both of us in the matchup going with the Prince, Amir Albazi, to get the win. Bringing it back to Extreme Couture, Coach Eric Nixick has another pupil in the main event, Sean Strickland, who's taking on Jared Cannonier. Not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.